Hold that thought.
Always important. There we are.
Mhm. Now we're recording. All right. So let's try this again. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Tulsa ISACA webinar. We're going to talk about the trials and tribulations of cloud migration, and Jake's going to take us through that as we go. Remember, please feel free to make this as interactive as you want. If you want to be on camera, feel free. That will certainly help keep Jake engaged, I'm sure. And if you'd like to come off mute and ask questions, feel free to do so. If not, I'll be monitoring the chat. And with that, Jake, I'll throw it over to you if you want to do a quick introduction and jump into your presentation.
Sure. I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. Welcome to Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, aka copy paste, is not a cloud migration strategy. Um, as you can see there, my name is Jake Hildreth, CISSP for about 4 years now, principal security consultant at Semperis or Semperis, depending on how you're feeling at the moment. Um, this is who I am. I am a husband. I'm a dad. And I'm a recovering sysadmin. And that means I haven't thought about putting an Exchange server in my house for the last, actually probably about 8 days now at this point. It came around again recently. So I've been in IT for 25 years, started out in help desk, and then worked up through the typical help desk sysadmin security path, transitioned over to strictly security about 4 years ago. Formerly worked at Trimark with Sean Metcalf. If you're an AD guy, AD gal, AD person, you know Sean Metcalf. Make open source tools that try to help people deal with AD. Locksmith is about AD certificate services. Blue Tuxedo is about Active Directory integrated DNS. And PowerPug is about using the protected users group safely. So if you're interested in doing all of those things, grab one of those tools, try it out. And as of March this year, I am now a Microsoft MVP in both Identity and Access and PowerShell. So love PowerShell. That's why I didn't put who am I in the top left. That is how you do it in PowerShell, right? All right. That out of the way, this is what we're going to talk about today. First, I'm going to give quick background on what AD and Entra are. I'm assuming we've got people here that know those things, but never hurts to level set. And then we are going to go through and I'm going to step through things. I'm going to give you an Active Directory problem. I'm going to tell you how there's a matching or similar Entra ID problem, and then actually provide some possible solutions that you get with Entra. You know, since Entra was not released until 2008, and really didn't hit its stride until, I don't know, probably 10 years ago, maybe even a little longer than that. They were able to learn from a lot of the Active Directory issues. So there are some solutions. Then lastly, we're just going to summarize things. I'm going to tell you what I told you. And then we're going to go from there. All right, let's kick it off with my friend, Active Directory. I've been working in Active Directory since I built a Active Directory Server 2000 forest in my apartment at the age of 23, and then had my coworker, or not coworkers, my roommates join the forest with their personal computers, and then they went, "Wait, do you have control over my computer now?" I was like, "Oops, I guess so." uh, So working in Active Directory, I have seen a lot of problems. And the problems are just super widespread because, as we all know, Active Directory is one of the most popular identity platforms out here, right? Used by about 90% of companies that have 500 or more employees, and that's around the world. And this is super hard to estimate because you don't have to register your Active Directory anywhere, right? But because it's so, everywhere, huge researcher community. And because it's so old at this point, 25 years old, there's a lot of ancient lore that has just passed down over time. And so what that's resulted in is really, weak password policy still hanging around, GPO hell. I don't know if that qualifies as a swear, but I'm going to use it a lot in here. Group sprawl, unprotected control plane, formerly known as Tier 0, right? Your most important assets that control identity in your environment. Trust, service accounts, etc. All of these things have kind of built up over time. And when Entra came along, I figured, we would be able to just have a clean break and move on. But this is what we have now, right? So as you can see, the common issues are fairly similar. We're talking about, again, passwords and things like trusts, not exactly called trusts, but still things like trusts. Um, and really, I am not an Entra person, right? I am an Active Directory person. I told Jonathan this when we started talking. My Entra experience is with working with my coworkers that do Entra ID assessments. And every time they're telling me about an issue, I'm like, wait, that's the same thing that just happened over here. How is this still a thing over here? So, as you can see, lines up pretty one-to-one here. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right into the one, the only, weak password policies. All right, in Active Directory, it's fairly understandable why weak password policies still exist, right? You've got old defaults for the longest time, and I believe this still might be the case. I haven't checked it in a while, but deploying Active Directory out of the box, minimum password length is 7 characters. Microsoft recommendation is 8 characters. That's not long enough for me. And then complexity rules, we'll talk about that in a second. But because of these old policies that have just sort of always been in place, users are just simply able to reuse their weak passwords, rotate through their 3 passwords over and over and over. Or, in worst cases, take a known compromise password, right? Have I been pwned, and all of the other password vendors all have these giant lists of compromised passwords that they maintain. Like, out of the box, Active Directory does not support checking any of that. You can't set up password lists that are banned. You can't do any of this stuff. So users just continuously reuse these passwords.
Jake, so I know you
Yeah.
got a lot. I know you got a lot to cover, but I gotta ask, why in the world does Microsoft do this? Why do we continue to have this 8-character password when we know my laptop could break that in a couple of seconds? Why? Why?
Let me
Explain.
show you my next bullet here. Old legacy apps. You know it, right? And things that need 6 characters or 4 characters or 0 character passwords. And despite the release of, fine-grained password policies, which were released back in server 2008 time, which allow you to have a strong default domain password policy and a weaker fine-grained password policy that only applies to a small number of users, groups, etc. It's just not used commonly. So yeah, maintaining, and man, you're already touching on one of my last points, so stay back there a little bit. Uh, Another problem, we've all taught, NIST's 800-53, their guidance to not require password changes unless there's an indication of compromise, still is really hard to push through. Um, and then because of all that, it really makes it so attackers can just do credential stuffing and password sparing all day. So let's see how it's better in Entra. Again, default password policy is not great. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I am hoping it's 10. Yeah, but it's still not great. Additionally, MFA has now become easier in Entra ID, but people still, feel like there's this hill to climb to get it get it implemented. So they delay it, right? And then again, despite the really good recommendation of don't force a user to change their password unless there's a reason to, there's still compliance requirements, things like that, that are requiring password changes more frequently, which results in this, summer 2010. Oh man, that's an old password. Summer 2025, I guess would be a little better. Um, and lastly, password complexity is really still misunderstood, right? There, when I was first understanding what a password was, I was like, hey, I'm just going to throw that exclamation point at the end. Nobody will ever correct that. But as we showed back on this slide, right? Weak, still weak. Ultimately, though, Entra has kind of improved things. This is the default is higher. MFA is easier to set up. Wow, that color really kind of messed up my face. So Entra does provide additional solutions on top of that, right? The Entra password protection allows you to set banned passwords. It allows you to do smart lockouts. It allows you to check for compromised passwords. It's really cool. You are able to require MFA universally now. So in an Active Directory, there are some places that you can use MFA, and there are some places that you can't, unless you're adding on Silverfort or Microsoft Global Access or Private Access. I forget, one of the accesses. And biggest one here, you are able to do passwordless authentication once you get into Entra, right? You can do Windows Hello for Business for your Intune joined devices. You can do FIDO2 keys, which really work great. Some of that passwordless authentication does exist in Active Directory, right? Smart cards exist, but they're a little complex and a little harder to set up. They really have just made this easier. And the one that I think really helps, the two that I think really help the best is like conditional access policies that allow you to do things based on the risk that is presented by the account that is trying to authenticate. So, the whole impossible travel, et cetera, can be, immediately cause a re-authentication. All right. Now, this slide is for people that read regex. Um, I I took a regex class like 2 years ago, and now I want to use it everywhere. So yeah, here we are. GPO hell. Yes, not we've all, but if you've ever administered Active Directory for any length of time, you've run into a situation where you link a GPO that you think is supposed to do a thing, and then you find out there's another GPO that takes precedence and unsets the thing. And in large environments, and I've seen some large environments, like million user environments, you're talking hundreds or thousands of these policies, which often are administered by, business units and things that have their own agenda on how they want to manage computers, which results in then a bunch of overlapping policies. Sometimes that results in group policy taking 20 minutes to apply. And sometimes it results in group policy not applying at all. And so because of the way that the hierarchical structure with being able to block inheritance and enforce inheritance, etc., it's just really hard to track the precedence and what effect you're going to get at the end of applying all these GPOs. And because of that, again, instability. You move a computer from one operational or organizational unit to another organizational unit. Will it act the same? Let's hope. Again, complexity, right? Complexity is the enemy of security. And another thing is those legacy policies often just stay around forever. Bob stood that up 10 years ago. I'm not 100% sure what it does, so I'm gonna leave it. Thankfully, in Entra, because they separated out Entra ID, the identity portion of Active Directory into, Entra ID, and then the configuration portion of Active Directory and GPOs into Intune, You thankfully don't have all of the issues that GPOs create, but instead you have conditional access policy hell. And in this, again, you've got overlapping conditional access policies that do the same things all over the place. And again, difficult to track down and visualize what your end result is going to be for a user or a computer to log on. And because of that, sometimes you're ending up with unintentional blocked access or allowed access. And this is the biggest thing that I've seen is not so much about not applying uh, accurately, but more about leaving gaps. Um, and we'll talk about how we can analyze those gaps in a little bit here. And then lack of standardization, always a problem. I'm a big fan of standard naming. And then once you have a ton of admins coming up, when anybody can create a conditional access policy, makes it even worse. So again, probably still a medium issue and more about those gaps being there, right? But again, we got possible solutions. Number one, whenever you stand up a new conditional access policy, do it in report only mode. That way you can see what's actually applying, whether it's applying or not when you expect it to apply, but not actually lock yourself out of anything. It's great. Try to work with the broadest amount or the templates that are cover the broadest number of people to start with. And then as you work down, work into more and more specialized cases, those templates get more and more specific. And then the thing that I like the best, I'm a visual learner. There are some apps out there, and I know that the ID Power app, that's by Meryl Fernando, is free. So you can actually visualize what conditional access policies are applying to which users, computers, identities, etc. And same thing with CA Optics. Unfortunately, CA Optics seems to be a little out of maintenance. And then Azure Monitor workbooks, that's a thing. My coworker told me about it. I don't know what it means, but hey, use them.
Jake,
All
I'm
right.
going, Jake, staying with
Yeah.
that for a second. If you are a standard, well, like let's say you're not an admin, can you still pull in the conditional access policies, or do you have to have them, like again, like if we're auditing it, if we're pulling in that data, is that something we'd have to ask the admin, hey, show me your conditional access policies?
Earlier this year, there was a report about methods to pull conditional access policies with just regular user access. Actually, it may have been unauthenticated now that I think about it. So, yeah, I saw that face. That's what
Yeah, I
I
don't
thought
like
too.
that.
No. um, yeah, the that being said, yeah, I believe that it's still possible to view all the because there has to be a way that your machine, your unauthenticated or low privilege machine should be able to pull those in. So
Yeah,
I can take a note on that and look that up later
yeah, I'd
for
love
you.
to hear more about it. But yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead and continue on. Thank
yeah,
you.
no problem. Thank you for giving me questions. It makes me feel useful. Uh, all right, group sprawl. I don't know how many times. So I've been assessing AD for 4 years now, and I would say 10% of those active directories that I've assessed have had more groups than they've had users. And I look at it like, what what are y'all doing here? And what it usually comes down to is you've got this group that has three people in it that does this one thing, and then this three group with three people in it, or two of the people overlap, and then they have one different person that does a slightly different thing. And I get it, granularity is important, but sometimes being too granular can really kind of shoot you in the foot, especially when then you are going through and, you know, deleting old accounts or removing old accounts, and then those empty groups never get cleaned up. I saw an assessment earlier last month, 2 months ago, where 90% of their groups were empty. And that included they were nested and nested and nested and nested and ended up still empty. It was very strange. Because of that, hard to track where groups are applied. I think I meant to say with group policy because you can apply to group policy to groups and stuff. Um, and then this is the thing that really got me is permission creep. I wrote an article a couple years back about nested groups specifically, and you know, you hire an MSP and you give them domain admin because they need to be domain admin, and then they create a group that they add in to there that and then they add all their user accounts into that group, and suddenly you have 249 domain admins. It's a problem, and you don't expect it. When we presented it to the customer that had that, it was something like 249 domain admins in a environment of 1,000 people. It was wild. Um, they were like, "Oh, shouldn't be that way," and it was thankfully shouldn't be that way, taken care of, done. But in a lot of environments, it's just not that easy to unravel. So, and unfortunately, we get two kinds of groups to deal with in Entra ID, right? We've got security groups and M365 groups, and they're managed differently, etc. And just like in AD, orphaned and inactive groups are very common. Uh, it is very hard to tell when group permissions are actually being used in Entra. And then guest users. Do you actually want to consider them part of a group or not? To me, it seems like I really just want to know the users that are in my tenant that need the thing. But guest users are a problem. We'll touch on that in a second. And manual cleanup rarely happens. I would say never, but I've seen it once. It's all good. But again, this is just a medium issue, right? If you understand what you're doing, the number of groups that you have can be not an issue, right? It really is not a problem. I saw you come off mute
Yeah,
there.
I got to ask a question on this, Jake. So I've always heard that orphaned objects are always a problem or and can always be an attack vector. So like if you have an orphaned user, GUID, whatever it is out there,
Mm-hmm.
an attacker can use that to do things, with various exploits. Groups, is that the same scenario or is the risk as high or is it lower?
I will say in AD, yes, that is the same issue, right? So,
Really?
with because when you're making an access request, right, you have a token that includes all of your it includes your security identifier and all the groups that you are a member of is part of your token. So if you can modify that token or if you can modify the set history value, I'm not sure what the equivalent is in Entra, but clean them up, get rid of them if you can. If you can.
Gotcha. That's
Yep,
great.
yep,
Thanks, Jake.
yeah. But again, we have solutions in Entra ID that just didn't exist in Active Directory. Entra ID governance is a thing that they actually offer as part of, as most higher level Entra licensing. You can expire inactive M365 groups. They can go away. However, the things that you're really going to need to do aren't actually any built-in options. Put an owner on a group, have the owner review it. I may just do a talk that is just like how to make an owner for everything, because if something has an owner, it generally doesn't get neglected. I mean, yeah. Again, naming conventions. I like seeing naming conventions. It makes it easier for, your defenders, your auditors, etc., to identify what things are, and it really doesn't put a roadblock in front of any skilled attacker at all, right? They're looking at the permissions, they're looking at the identifiers, etc., that would otherwise indicate who a user is. And lastly, just monitor with access reviews to make sure that those groups are actually being used. So, all right. Now we get into the fun stuff, the unprotected control plane. So, as an assessor, this is the thing that I really focus on in AD is formerly tier 0. I still like that. That's still the terminology we throw around internally, tier 0. Um, and just as a reminder, what tier 0 is, this is your domain controllers, this is your enterprise admins, but people also don't realize that things like account operators and cert publishers are tier 0 as well. And sure, they don't have a direct, there's not a, I can log in and make changes immediately to my AD, but I can log into my PKI server and I can get a certificate for my domain admin that now allows me to change AD, right? Um, it's hard to isolate for so many reasons. Um, you know, are you running a completely separate virtualization stack for your domain controllers? No? Okay. Well, guess what? Now your virtualization admins are tier 0 by default. Are you actually using privileged access workstations? And no, CyberArk does not qualify as a privileged access workstation. Um, does your SCCM admin have control over your PKI servers? Guess what? Now SCCM should be considered tier 0, etc. It's just very hard to isolate that. And of course, that's where attackers are eventually trying to go. If you can get into tier 0, you're going to uh, own everything. Oh, and we already talked about this one. Yeah, management plane, right? All the management stuff. That's really the attack path. All right, Entra. It's got to be better, right? Please. No, unexpected rolls are still tier 0. When I worked at Trimark, we went through and did our own sort of identification of privileged roles. And it got down to a place where it's like, oh, if you're dedicated enough, almost all of these roles are tier 0. So um, service principals. Nice crying emoji. It's very true. Uh, Service principals. Um, if they've been granted excessive rights, and we'll touch on that in a little bit, sometimes can be abused as well. Shockingly, and this is something that I learned about. I did a presentation a couple weeks back with my coworker Eric Woodruff, who is Entra ID guy, and like he's like, "Oh yeah, Intune, Intune is immediately if you set up pause that are Intune managed, now you're Intune, administrators." Like, huh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And he said, and also anybody that controls a subscription can just build their own tier 0 stuff. I'm like, why? Why? And oh yeah, management plane. I need to move the management plane one up higher. I am starting to blow through these pretty quickly, by the way. So, but now we are starting to get into a higher concern. This is one place though that I will say that the Entra, by using logging and just Sentinel's really great at showing when things can be abused. Um, this next one is not so much about Entra specifically, but get your separated privilege access workstation going. Um, and I don't mean a jump host, and I don't mean a bastion host living in Azure. I mean a separate device that really is just for administrative tasks, locked down as much as possible. I know it's more expensive, but breaches are really expensive. Breaches are really expensive. Accounts are free. Paws are cheap comparatively. It's hard. I get it. I think it's worth it. But yeah. make sure that all of your tier 0 accounts, identities, are protected with MFA. I know that's now enforced. I know there's also ways that you can sort of get around it. Just don't make exceptions. Eat your own dog food, right? And privileged identity management is your friend. You don't need admin privileges at all times. So don't have them at all times. When you need them, justify your need and use PIM to grant those rights. And then, of course, the old principle of least privilege. Can't go an entire security talk without talking about that. So, um, scoping things down, and then just enough administration. I don't think gets enough is not brought up enough, but that you know granting just those administrative privileges that are required for that task. I know that PowerShell Gia back in the day, maybe 10 years ago when it first came out, was like super complex and hard to work with. Miriam Wiesner for Microsoft has released a whole book on how to do it and do it well. Get into it.
But before we go on,
Yeah.
with regard to for named users, obviously MFA isn't a problem. But for non-named users, non-users, how would you recommend enforcing some type of multi-factor on those
You're
non-named users?
you're talking like a app registration, a
Well,
service
yeah,
principal, etc.
exactly,
Yeah.
or just admin, the default admin.
Oh, like that, a shared sort of thing.
Exactly, shared accounts, or just not, or like you were saying there, even the app registers and such.
Yeah. Well, with app registrations and service principals, we will touch on that later. There are some built-in Entra solutions. Regarding the shared admins thing, I think you should not have shared admins except for your two break glass. The end. Like there should be no shared administration. And those two break glass accounts, are protected to the highest level, and they are alerted on for every single possible usage, et cetera, et cetera. But if you eliminate those shared accounts, those non-specific accounts, that just goes out the window, I think. I know
To
it's
be
a
honest,
crappy answer. I'm sorry.
no, 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 that's perfectly fair. But to be honest, Jake, the break glass accounts are really the ones that cause us nightmares
Oh,
on a daily basis. So that's the ones I was really thinking about. And so what you're basically saying is monitoring is really the only solution. Proactive
it
monitoring.
really is. It really
Okay.
is. And we're I'm working with Eric to do a tool release next year that sort of still highlights the problems with that method, and it mainly is around the time, right? You have an untrusted login to your break glass account. How long does it actually take you from Entra to find that out? We'll see what we can if we can scare up uh, enough concern about that.
No, that makes sense. That's great. Thanks, Jake.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Now we're going to talk about multi-org collaboration. So in the past, right, in Active Directory, forest trusts. I used to work for the city of Bowling Green, Ohio, and we had one trust, which was with our county. We worked we were in the same city, and there we shared computer assisted dispatching, whatever the dispatch systems that they use. We shared the same system for that, and so we had one trust between our systems. Um, that thing scared the heck out of me, especially when last December they got ransomware. I was not there, thankfully, but I immediately was like, "Is that trust still around? Oh crap! How long until my buddies, my old friends, are gonna get nailed, right? Because there's not nearly as much of a. And we'll touch on this on the Entra part, the solutions part, but it's pretty much trust is trust, right? They've added some things about SID filtering and quarantining and things that limit some of what can go across your trust between environments, but it's still pretty legacy. Sorry, it's still pretty open. Um, adding on to that, right, you've got these complex relationships between, is it a one-way trust? Is it inbound? Is it outbound? Is it transitive? Is it all these things? You know, and it can be hard to map once you get past two, three, four trusts, right? And we've seen, I saw in my past, an environment with 30 plus trusts. And most of them, we would ask, what is this for? Oh, oh man, okay. Um, and because of that openness and the lack of true, you know, I don't want to say lack of auditing because it's there, but it's really hard to suss out exactly what's going on. And it's really easy to screw up. If you don't set up your filtering properly, you're allowing everything cross. That's a problem. And because of that, attackers are regularly using movement. It should say cross forest movement, not cross domain movement, but you get my point. You know, you get into the DMZ forest, and that has a trust into your on-prem forest and in production. And there's a lot of groups out there that have shown how to abuse a one-way trust that shouldn't be abusable, right? So we don't have forests in Entra, but we've got cross-tenant access and we've got those guest accounts that you were talking about. And we got multi-cloud stuff, which is also really fun. Thankfully, I'll save this for the solutions part, but they just got to be managed carefully, right? And MFA is not always enforced for guests. You don't want to make it harder for your guests to work in your environment, right? Okay.
Yes, yes, we do.
Thank you. I like that. And that does, but it is still like you want to be open and inviting, and open and inviting means sometimes that the wrong person walks into your front door. Another one that I just came across recently was shadow IT through guest accounts. What was the restless guest attack that was popular for a little while? I don't know the specifics, but basically a guest could join your tenant and then set up a subscription in your tenant that they control. Like, look that up. Yeah, restless guest. Yeah, it's wild. And then it's not untrackable, but it's very difficult to track down. So yeah, I guess if you really just want some bonus admins, go for it. Maybe they do a better job. uh, Thankfully, again, the tools that are in Entra for this are pretty good. And so the risk is only medium high. The problem here is the reason I didn't just throw this as a medium and more of a medium high is that you are relying on, you still have to rely on the security of others. However, ultimately you control it and you can cut it off at will. So you can do that via those cross-tenant access policies, both inbound and outbound. So you can say who you are allowed to work with and who is allowed to work with you. Pretty easy to set up. It is possible to enforce multi-factor authentication and conditional access policies for external identities. So, if you want to play with us, you got to have authenticator, right? You got to have a device-bound passkey. You got to have something in order to play with us. Yeah, part of those policies is you can allow and deny specific domains. You can set up conditional access policies that just apply to those guests. I've seen before conditional access policy where they just turn off MFA because they wanted to do it for their guests and then screw it up and it's turned off for everybody. And this though is super easy to audit and figure out who's actually using what if people are logging in properly. So
So
yeah,
Jake, I
that
feel like
is
you may have already answered this for me, but guests, we've always felt like guest accounts are just of such significant risk. We can't control them as well, or we've been told at least. We can't control them as well. We have to rely on their policies to be able to, authenticate and all that kind of stuff. So I love what you're saying around the external identities that you can enforce MFA. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Um, but do you feel like is guest really that big a deal? I mean, obviously the restless guest thing you're talking about, that's going to keep me up for a while. But the other thing, if you're doing the right things with guests, are they really that big of a risk, or is it do we have bigger fish to fry?
Bigger fish to fry, yes, for sure, for sure. I would say the things we're about to touch on are much more important. But it's also it's that fear of the unknown, and that to me is just as scary as, oh man, we're gonna get into the Rumsfeld matrix, aren't we? The known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, and this is a known unknown, right? We know that it's a concern. We're not sure exactly what to be concerned about there. So, um, yeah, but the known knowns that we're going to touch on here in a little bit, definitely the bigger fish.
That's perfect. Thanks, Jeff.
Cool. Yep, yep. Unmanaged non-human identities. I'm not sure when the term non-human identities came out, but man, I've been trying to think of a way of computers and apps and service principals and service accounts and all these things. And like somebody said this to me, and I was like, nailed it, nailed it. I watched a talk at Blue Team Con a couple weeks back where they talked about, 5 years ago is it was 1-to-1 basically of non-human to human, and now it's what 100-to-1 non-human to human. So yeah, this is a concern. Thankfully in AD it was service accounts, right? You had accounts. Unfortunately, often those accounts were not known and forgotten about. And the passwords are never rotated because you don't know what's going to break, right? Where is this being used? Who owns this? Who owns this server that is running this one account, etc. There's no lifecycle management, which results in the forgotten accounts. Risk of compromise is high. Red teamers, pen testers, and APTs all love a service account for the reasons listed above, and taking advantage of typical Kerberos usage in Kerber roasting, right? You can't really avoid Kerber roasting. And for a quick aside there, the that's requesting a service ticket from a service, which is then encrypted with the hash or key of that service's credential. That can be taken offline and then just run through a cracking rig until you find the password. And it's never identified because all the work is done offline. It's wild how Kerber roasting works. Yeah, I'm not sure if you all know of Tim Medine's Wednesday Offensive with his company Red Siege, but they go in there and it's fun to go be able to sit down in a small conversational environment with Tim Medine and just talk about fun stuff like that. So, um, and last thing, difficult cleanup at 84 is it's hard to pull a service account out once it's stood up. In Entra, we don't have service accounts. We have service principals, which is the same thing with a different name. Um, they're used to run apps, and when those get orphaned, those registrations just hang around. Those secrets are either unmanaged or expired. I almost prefer an expired, like that. So unmanaged, right? We've got an actual secret that is applied to it that needs to be rotated on a regular basis. With at least with the certificate, it will expire over time and things break, and then people look at it and want to work on it. Oftentimes, service principals are just granted the just give it a little admin. It'll work. It is difficult, or was for a while, to identify who actually owns a service principal. That is again changing. Um, but one thing that a lot of people don't notice is that an owner can actually act as the service principal that they own. Or if they own an app, they can act with the app's permissions that they have. So, all of your apps and service principals should be owned by a tier 0 group, a control plane group, a control plane object somehow. So now we're starting to get into the level of high, right? These are big deals. But Entra is really digging into this to solve issues. Managed identities are awesome. There is no secret. You don't deal with the secret at all. No certificate, no password, no API key, nothing. Related to that, workload identity federation, which allows you to work multi-cloud that we talked about before. If you can't deal with any of those, though, there are methods out there now for rotating your secrets, expiring the secrets. I would much rather you have a secret that expires in a year and causes something to break than you have something that lasts forever and causes your entire environment to be ransomware. And ultimately, like, monitor what's... Oh, wait, yes, we talked about ownership. Sorry, my notes do not match the bullets on the screen. When things are owned, right, by someone, by a person, and this not necessarily the owner, right? I'm talking about not the logical owner, but just a person that is in, needs to know about this this app or this non-human identity. Give it an owner. Make sure that they know what's going on, why it's used, what it's used for, etc. All right, related, over privileged non-human identities. Again, throw it in domain admin, it'll work. Sure will. These credentials are often hard-coded in easily found spots and rarely rotated. And like we talked about, if an attacker, they're going to target these accounts. And probably the biggest thing here is that vendors demand the privileges. They demand the privileges. Unsupported if not in domain admin. We were just talking about this the other night about we've come across services that don't actually require domain admin, but will check to make sure they are in the domain admin group before operating. Mind-blowing. Thankfully, I will say, even in the 4 years that I've been in security, I have seen the number of service accounts that actually require domain admin to be dropping off. So it only took 10 years of people yelling before it started to do stuff. So yeah, super happy about that. All right, in Entra, again, throw it in global admin, it'll work. Oftentimes, right, consent to these things is never actually like checked. You can just your users and groups can just set things up whenever they want. Much like we said before, because these secrets live forever, they become a huge target. Nobody is reviewing what that's doing, and it's very difficult to audit. So again, high risk presented by the overprivileged service principals. Talking about overprivileged service principals, or not, sorry, overprivileged non-human identity. There we go. And I know we already mentioned it once, but the way to solve this and to solve in most things is just start from zero and build up to what you need. If you do need to use stores, you do need to use secrets, store them in a key vault, rotate them frequently, audit what's actually being used by the app and try to cut it down if you can. And then absolutely just minimize those scopes as tightly as possible. And then all of this really just kind of leads up to admin sprawl. So too many accounts with domain admin rights. As a review, domain admin can do anything in a forest. Doesn't matter what actual domain it's in. The forest is the security boundary. If it's a child domain, there are paths up to take control of the root domain and all the other child domains. So, and it all just comes from not enforcing those least privileges. It's difficult to audit admin activity, which presents an issue. And in Active Directory, it is kind of hard to, again, oh man, my notes don't match my bullets again. There we go. That's the one that I wanted. Hard to enforce time-bound access. It's possible. There's time to live for, users being a member of a group, and objects that, they can dissipate and disappear over time. People don't know about it, and it's hard to really kind of track. So, um, but it does exist. Global admin sprawl, very similar. Too many standing global admins, and that's an important thing. Standing global admins. We talked about privileged identity management earlier. We're going to harp on it again here. And much like in AD, when you're a global admin, you can just disable any of your protections anyway, or most of them anyway. So makes it hard to track what global admins are actually doing. The delegated roles that are out there are highly underutilized, and expired admins are rarely removed. Again, like you were talking about, if there's an account sitting around that has those role memberships or group memberships, somebody's going to find it. Somebody's going to take advantage of it. So again, high risk. But use PIM. Please, just use PIM. Just use PIM. Please, just because someone's an admin and has admin in their title, do not give them global admin. Please pick one of the other administrators. Absolutely require justification for whenever these more privileged groups are being used. Audit it with logs and purview. I don't know why purview on there. Uh, and then make sure you are running recurring access reviews, right? This is not a one-time thing. This is not a one-year thing. It's every, I don't know. What do you recommend, Jonathan, for access reviews? Continual?
It depends. Well, no, I mean honestly, monitoring it and having a notification would be good as well. But quarterly or annual certainly
Sure,
wouldn't hurt.
sure.
But yeah, a detailed review is important for those, I would certainly say.
Yeah. My coworker, former coworker, is actually mid creation of a talk called "A Domain Admin is a Domain Admin Logon is a High Fidelity Alert." Prove me wrong. Like, yeah, you should never see those things, right? And could just extend that to global admin. So, all right, and really, all of this comes down to this is the root of everything, right? Operational uptime, etc., forces all of these things to happen. We'll fix it later. We got to keep things running, et cetera, et cetera. That's why legacy protocols remain. That's why some of the more modern protection devices that are built into Active Directory are not used. Authentication policies and silos, the protected users group that I love, um, Kerberos armoring. These things, some people don't even know they exist, let alone how to use them, right? And a lot of these, especially authentication policies and silos, break a lot of Active Directory attacks just completely. So, and risk is accumulating as systems age because operations takes precedence, right? You got to keep it going. So, anything that was bad in the past is going to keep rolling forward. I thought when we moved to Entra, we'd get a clean break. But I will say, because of uh, the always changing nature of Entra, some of that stuff has kind of gone away. But instead, we get a different set of operational problems, which is now we are still relying too much on that perimeter or your trusted network, right? We are like, for example, giving, there we are, MFA exemptions for inside the corporate network. Don't do that. Just don't. Just because they're inside the corporate network doesn't mean anything. Once an attacker gets in via phishing, they're inside your corporate network. Still throw MFA up there. Things like device compliance being checked for, power user or whatever. No, don't do it. It's hard. I get it. Politics is hard. Yeah. But explaining why you got breached is probably harder, I would guess. And possibly the most important, a lot of these like beneficial things are delayed again, like we talked about with MFA earlier, right? They're delayed because it's perceived as complex to set up. And I'm not going to lie, some of this stuff is.
Jake,
But
I just wanted to give you a quick time check. You're about five
oh yeah,
minutes out.
cool.
And I know you had some closing comments you wanted to give, and again, thank you and thanks Temperance for letting you hang out with
Yeah.
us for an hour or so.
This is yeah, this is where I'm at. This is we're almost done. I think let's see. Yeah,
That's fine. Perfect.
cool. Our risk level for this, it does not compute. It is I don't understand. Um it really depends, right? I've seen some environments that they're like, no, we're going security for everything first, and it really depends. So, also, my daughter saw me working on these slides this morning. It was like I had the old Rodney Dangerfield math one, and she's like, no, 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 you need to put the cat in the cat math one. I'm like, okay, I will. And she goes, and because I put it in a slide deck earlier, I was like, oh, that's cute. All right, what can we do? We know all these, right? Enforce cap conditional access policies with MFA. Don't allow anybody exceptions. Use those risk-based policies that we talked about, right? The risk-based stuff is super, super, super useful. And if you can, roll up passwordless stuff completely. We just did it at Semperis. Today was my passkey day. I had to have my device-bound passkey set up today. I had it set up last week. For once, I was ahead of the curve. So that helps out a ton. So in summary, this is what we have. You know, a lot of things that are built in that you can take advantage of today to not repeat the sins of the AD past. So I really hope that helped out. Like you said, a little bit of quick shilling. I do work for Semperis/Semperis. We've got free stuff out there. Purple Knight will do a quick misconfiguration check for your on-prem AD and Entra ID. Forest Druid is attack path based stuff. For on-prem AD, ADFR is Active Directory Forest Recovery, which helps you recover your forest without following along the 147-page Microsoft document. DSP Directory Services Protector. Services, that's who I work for, right? I am in the services department. We do identity-focused incident response, and then also do preventative stuff, security assessment on your AD, Entra ID, do disaster recover planning, and then can also actually do remediation and infrastructure planning for you too. So, and then next month, if you are interested in this sort of thing, we're gonna Semperis has a conference called the Hybrid Identity Protection Conference. Things are still available. Keynotes, Jen Easterly, formerly of CISA, Chris Inglis, the first cyber director for the US, Dr. Mary Aiken. I'll be talking. If you're interested in Active Directory certificate services, come on out. I'll be talking about how to attack Active Directory certificate services. It's my first time talking about things from a defensive side. And I'm following Chris Inglis, which is really making me stressed out because if you've never seen him talk, he is literally the best speaker I have ever seen. Literally. That's all I got. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank
Jake,
you to chapter staff. Thank you to everybody
yeah,
that watched. If you want to hook up with me, scan that QR code. I promise no funny stuff. I
no
promise no funny
shenanigans.
stuff.
Love it.
Yeah,
Jake, thanks so much. It was great, very informative. We'll definitely try to have you back sometime. It was a great
absolutely.
conversation. As I said, I really appreciate it. To those who are on the call, so we do have a meeting coming up on October 2nd. It's a hybrid lunch and learn, so either remote or in person. Do whatever you want there. Remote is free. If you want to do in person, obviously it's 25 for members, 30 for non-members. If you're in the Tulsa area, it's going to be on the fact or fiction around generative AI. What are the buzzwords? What is the real stuff? So it should be a lot of fun. We're looking forward to it. Again, Jake, thanks. This was so great, and we'll chat later on. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks,
absolutely.
everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you much.